The NFL finished its regular season with quite a spectacle. In a nail-biter last night, the Raiders defeated the Chargers to advance to the playoffs. Las Vegas' overtime win against Los Angeles came down to a 47-yard field goal. The kick cleared as the clock wound down to 0. Some football fans were worried the game was going to end up in a tie. Here to break it all down for us is CBS Sports' Tyler Sullivan. Tyler, what were the consequences of the Raiders' win?
Well, it's exactly like you just said. There were some scenarios going into this game where the Raiders and the Chargers, all they really needed to do was tie, and they both would punch their ticket into the postseason. Ultimately, they didn't just take a knee for 4 quarters. They ended up actually playing the game, but the game still did end up going to overtime. And there was some controversy towards the end. Chargers head coach Brandon Staley did call a timeout where it did look like the Raiders were going to be comfortable just letting the clock run out in overtime to both send those teams into the playoffs. Ultimately didn't end up happening. The Raiders kicked the field goal and won the game, and that ultimately punched the tickets for the Pittsburgh Steelers to make the playoffs. The only way they weren't able to get into both of these teams tied. So the Steelers and Raiders are in the playoffs, and the Chargers are now on the outside looking in and looking into 2022.
So football fans witnessed another overtime victory, this time with the Steelers. What's working for Pittsburgh as they advance to the playoffs?
Yeah, Pittsburgh, it was a nail-biter towards the end of that game on Sunday night, but they are in the playoffs, and it's really been because of their defense. Ben Roethlisberger has been a big story for them, the quarterback, for a long time for this franchise, likely in his final season, but he looks like a quarterback that's in his final season. He really hasn't been moving the offense the way he has in what has been a Hall of Fame career. It's really been their defense, and with T.J. Watt, as you see on the screen, he has just been an absolute star for this team. Defensive Player of the Year worthy candidate. He just tied Michael Strahan for the most sacks in a single season. So if they're going to have success as a underdog in this playoffs as they go to Kansas City to face the Chiefs this weekend, it's going to be because of that defense. It's going to be because of T.J. Watt pressuring Patrick Mahomes. That's really what is going to be the key for them. Their offense has some players, but it would really need for Ben Roethlisberger to turn back the clock for him to be much of a factor.
Let's talk about the Colts suffering a surprising defeat against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What issues did this game reveal for Indy?
Yeah, it really centers around the quarterback, Carson Wentz. It was a poor performance from him. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they are not a good football team. They're going to have the #1 pick in the NFL draft later this spring, which means they had the worst record in the 2021 season. And this was a game that the Indianapolis Colts needed to have. All they needed to do to go into the playoffs was win this game, and they were into the playoffs. And ultimately, they couldn't do it. And that was Carson Wentz pretty much, was the main fault there. Had 2 critical turnovers. And this is something that the Colts are going to have to look at. They acquired him this past offseason, traded what ended up being a first-round pick for him, and he hasn't been able to live up in these big moments. They have a solid foundation, solid coaching staff, but the quarterback situation, if he cannot elevate this team to win these games that are very much easy games. This is not a tough, Sunday night football, Chargers, Raiders, overtime situation. If you can't beat the worst team in the NFL to get into the playoffs, well, then you might have to look elsewhere if you're the Indianapolis Colts at the quarterback spot.
So now that the regular season is over, some teams are going to be looking to make some personnel changes. Which organizations do you expect to make major coaching and roster moves?
Yeah, you're already starting to see it. The day after the regular season ends, it's called Black Monday in the NFL, and that's where you see a lot of head coaches and GMs start to lose their jobs, the teams that haven't been able to reach the postseason, and you've already started to see it across the league. The Minnesota Vikings clearing house, firing head coach Mike Zimmer and their GM. The Chicago Bears doing the same thing with head coach Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. But the most shocking one that we've seen so far come down has been with the Miami Dolphins and head coach Brian Flores. They elected to fire Flores after 3 seasons, and this one was pretty surprising for someone who is up here in the Northeast. He was with the New England Patriots for a few years. He was a up-and-coming head coach, had a solid career with the Miami Dolphins. It was an under 500 record, but if you looked at this season, they were able to sweep the New England Patriots. No small feat. They were able to go on a 7-game winning streak to go up to the tail end of the year. They beat the New England Patriots yesterday in their own building. It's a surprising decision. I would not expect Brian Flores to be without a job for much longer.
let me ask you about this. Many are predicting that Green Bay's Aaron Rodgers will be named this year's MVP, but other stars like Tampa Bay's Tom Brady also seem to have a shot. Who do you think deserves the title?
Yeah, Rodgers certainly worthy of the consideration. He's had a tremendous season, obviously the MVP award winner last year. If he's able to do it this year, be the first quarterback or first player, I should say, since Peyton Manning was able to do it a few years ago. But to me, I think you mentioned it, Tom Brady, to me, as crazy as I can say, in the year 2022, not only is Tom Brady still playing in the NFL, but he is worthy of an MVP award. But if you look at the stats, they kind of play out. He's led the league in passing yards. He leads the league in passing touchdowns. He has a team in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who are the number 2 seed in the NFC, tied with the same record as Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, who are the number 1 seed. They just lost because of tie-breaking scenarios. But to me, Tom Brady has been able to do much more with little. He's had game-winning overtime touchdown passes. He was able to beat the New York Jets in the final minutes a few weeks ago. The fact that he's been able to do that without arguably two of his top 3 receivers, and Chris Godwin, who is out with a season-ending injury, and of course Antonio Brown, the situation that unfolded with him. He's no longer part of the team, and yet Tom Brady's still able to be an efficient quarterback and a highly productive quarterback. So for me, it's crazy to say, but the 44-year-old gets my vote for MVP.
So now that we know what the postseason is going to be looking like, I'm going to ask you to put yourself out on a limb. Which team do you see heading to the Super Bowl? Which teams?
Well, I think that if you're going to talk about a winner, I think it's going to come out of the NFC. The NFC has a little bit more of more elite teams at the top. You do have some stellar teams in the AFC, but ultimately I think the winner comes out of the NFC. And I like the Dallas Cowboys to win the Super Bowl. To me, it's crazy to say they've struggled a little bit over the last few weeks, but they have a defense that can win this time of year. They rank number 1 in the league in almost every category that you would want to lead the league in. And to me, if Dak Prescott and that offense can get right over this next week and get into the playoffs here, obviously, and get right after what we've seen over the last month, they have the firepower that can go toe-to-toe with anybody. And in the AFC, I think that they're going to be facing the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, 2 of the best in the league at the quarterback and head coaching positions, respectively. Both of those teams, again, the Cowboys and the Chiefs, high-powered offenses, but both have underrated defenses, especially with Kansas City. Both of these teams can make their way to the Super Bowl, but ultimately, I think it's going to be the Dallas Cowboys winning the Super Bowl this year.
All right. Hopefully we can say you heard it here first, because you're married now to the Dallas Cowboys. Tyler, thank you very much. So you can stream coverage of the 2022 postseason on Paramount+. The NFL playoffs are set to kick off on Saturday.